1, 2, 3, 4. Those are numbers, but you already knew that. If you want to know what number you're going to pay each month for your car, use Kelly Blue Book My Wallet on Auto Trader. They're really good at numbers. Auto Trader.
Bring me everyone. What do you mean everyone?
Alright, and hello and welcome to Unequal Sequel. My name is Dave and I am one of the two hosts of this very cool and exciting podcast.
And I'm Rich and I'm the other host of this cool and exciting podcast. Think of me as Batman to Dave's Superman. I've got a deeper voice, but he likes wearing his pants on the outside of his trousers.
That is very true. The premise of Unequal Sequel is very simple. We ask our guests their best ever sequel, their worst ever sequel, and finally their dream sequel.
And of course, we like to drift off and just talk about movies and sometimes think other stuff too.
We also go into a little bit of spoiler territory, but these are mostly very old movies, so you have been warned.
Yeah.
On today's episode, we are joined by Tim from the Sequelisers, which is the sequel to last week's episode.
And of course, you'll know already because you listened to last week's episode. Tim is a podcaster on the Sequelisers podcast where they take rubbish sequels and they pitch ideas to make them better. It's really entertaining, very worth a listen.
We were very excited to sit down with Tim and chat all things sequels with him.
This is Tim from the Sequelisers, Unequal Sequels. Enjoy!
So let's just start right at the very beginning. What is your first memory of a sequel that you loved, or the first memory of a sequel you wanted to saw in the cinema?
Oh man, I was trying to think of this because we were having a chat about it, not in as part of an episode, just amongst ourselves, the Sequelisers. My parents aren't particularly like film heavy people, so I went to the cinema when I was a kid, but we didn't like. I didn't have kind of my parents sitting me down to watch their favourite films kind of thing. So I think it would have been something almost sort of accidental. Like, I know I saw Ghostbusters 2, before I saw Ghostbusters, and also like pretty early on. I think I remember both of the Sister Act movies being on fairly heavy rotation when I was a kid. I think they just like ITV had the license to them and just decided to put them on every other Sunday afternoon, and so I have a lot of affection for those movies. I know they're not high art.
Sister Act 2 is awesome.
I'm just gonna let you know, Tim, I've cried at Sister Act 2.
Oh yeah, when he hits the high note when they're singing "Oh Happy Day," you know.
Yeah, I was so proud
get you
of
where
them.
you live.
So happy.
Yeah.
So no shame in that. This is a safe place for Sister Act 2, and it is better than Sister Act 1 in my opinion as well.
Yeah. Well, it's got it's got Lauryn Hill, like a young Lauryn Hill being like this talented singer, and what an amazing bit of like lucky casting they had there.
Very true.
Yeah, so it would have been stuff like that in cinema. Like the first ones that really jumped to mind are the Star Wars re-releases, but they would have been when I was about 11. So I think there must have been something before that. But they're the ones that really stick in my mind as like an early experience of going to the cinema, knowing that it was part of like a continuing story, and there was more to look forward to after that.
Yeah, and had you seen the Star Wars sequels at that point, like previously?
No, that was my first time seeing them in the cinema. So that was really
cool.
nice. Yeah, and then obviously the prequels came along a few years later, and I was 13 when I saw Phantom Menace, so I was like, the fight at the end was really cool, so I liked it. And then by the time Attack of the Clones came along, I was a little bit more like, I'm not sure this is actually good.
I mean, Attack of the Clones is by far the worst.
There's so many sequences of that where it's just a PS1 cutscene, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're spot on. It really is. Oh yeah, just there's the floating fruit scene with Anakin and Padme. Like, there's just no chemistry.
I've blacked out like most of the romance stuff in my brain. I think because of the age I saw it at, I wasn't kind of like particularly caring about that stuff. Now I'd love it if there was a great romance in a Star Wars film, but I think at the time I was just like, I don't care about it. I know he's going to turn into Darth Vader, so why do I care about this stuff? The film didn't go out of its way to make me care about it, despite my teenage objections.
It really didn't.
Yeah, so I think that sticks in the mind as a bad one.
But how amazing to have seen like Star Wars in the cinema for the first time, rather than like on a scratchy VHS. I think I would have seen it on for the first time. Like,
Yes.
that must have been outstanding.
Yeah, I mean, it does mean that I don't know if I've ever seen like the non-special edition versions. I think I must have at some point, but like, you know, stuff like, oh, you know, the sort of, I've always had those like CGI X-Wings shots that they've put in. They still stick in my mind. And I can remember my dad actually, like, one of the few times we have kind of bonded over films, talking about how he saw it early when in the UK, because he had like friends in Canada or something who managed to get hold of like a reel of it, and and then they'd come over to visit, and so they watched it at home on like a home projector.
So they brought a reel of Star Wars
That's
across the
amazing.
ocean.
Yes, yeah. So
Wow.
Yeah, so he saw at least some of it early, and then about I don't know what the gap between release in the US and the UK was, but 2 months later, you know, went and saw it in the cinema and was like,
I think it was months at this point. I had to look up a couple of episodes ago what the difference between Phantom Menace was between America and UK, and it was like nearly 2.5 months.
Yeah.
That would just be crazy if that happened now.
It's so strange to think about how that used to be the standard.
I mean, 6 months.
And thank God it isn't.
Like, it's it'd go half a year waiting for a film to come out over here that had been on in America. It was crazy.
And unfortunately, we still have it with a lot of the Oscar stuff. Sort of, obviously, the blockbusters, because they know that they're going to get pirated to death, tend to be sort of simultaneous, or even we get them a couple of days early now. But Oscar stuff, you can still be sitting around waiting and have it so that they haven't come out here by the time the Oscars are telling you that they're Best Picture, and you're like, great, I'll enjoy watching that in 6 weeks when it finally shows up.
But by that time, everyone's ruined.
Yes, yeah.
I do remember that we didn't get a cinematic release of John Wick for like 8 months here, and Snowpiercer, I don't think we ever got a release, and they did in North America.
Well, Snowpiercer got really hosed by Harvey Weinstein, unfortunately. I know that amongst his many crimes. Yeah, so I wouldn't be surprised if it just kind of sank without a trace here, and then came along on DVD and everyone was like, holy shit, have you seen this?
It's great.
I've not seen it.
What, Snowpiercer or John Wick?
Neither.
What?
I've not seen either of them.
Oh my God.
I know John Wick's supposed to be really good, and I will watch it one day. I'm sorry.
I'm the resident John Wick lover on our podcast. Not that the others hate it, but that I'm the most vocal like proponent of just how good it is. And
they are good.
I just have to be ready. If I know that a film has sequels, I know I have to watch all of those sequels. So before, I have to be ready and have the time to watch all 3 of them. Is it 3 or 4 now?
3 now, but 4's been made.
Yeah, 4's on the way. So you're only gonna add to your challenge the longer you leave it.
Exactly.
Maybe I'll watch the 3 for when 4 comes out, and we can do a review of 4.
Yes, but Rich, you're getting a dog very soon, so
Yes.
I don't know how to break this to you. I might break it to you now. He goes on a rampage because his dog dies, pretty much.
Right. I'm not sure I can watch this movie.
I'm sure that there must be out there like a John Wick edit where it just kind of like cuts out the first 15 minutes and it just starts with him on a rampage, and you never find it's just like, you just have to accept he's Keanu Reeves, he's killing a bunch of people.
He's got a dead wife as well. He can do something with that.
I'm less upset about his wife being dead than his dog. Like,
So's he.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, it does fortunately like populate the rest of the universe with a bunch of other cute dogs that he encounters and kind of semi-adopts.
That's okay.
So it
Sounds
makes
like a mix
up for it a
between
little bit.
Taken and Lady and the Tramp.
Yes, less talking dogs, but yes.
Cool, I'm down for that.
Love that bit where 2 Liam Neesons have a bit of spaghetti strung between their mouth. And...
Right, should we go on to the big question? What is your favourite sequel ever?
So I am a huge comics fan. Even more than that, a huge X-Men fan. And so I can remember seeing the trailer for the first one in front of Mission Impossible 2 in the cinemas, and actually like shaking with excitement at the prospect of seeing these characters up on the big screen. And I think X2 is just a fantastic film. I think it builds on what the first film did, which I know the first film seems to have turned into a bit of a punching bag in the first few years of people going like, oh, it's a bit ropey. And I know obviously like there were a lot of decisions made of, like, oh, we can't do the costumes realistically and all that kind of stuff, which it turns out, hey, you can, and people love it. But I still think the first film has a lot of strengths. X2, I think, is just so good. It handles the big ensemble cast better than most other films. Like I struggle to think of films that balance that size of cast as well, especially like an action film kind of thing, and gives everyone some form of like character arc through it.
Yeah.
Apart from maybe Storm. Yeah, I love it. I can remember seeing it in the cinema. It was the first DVD I ever bought, and I still love it to this day. Obviously, Bryan Singer is fallen from grace, shall we say, to put it lightly, which is unfortunate, but trying to kind of separate the art from the artist, I think it's a fantastic film. It is a series that has then never hit that height, not even close, I don't think, apart from Logan, which, is only distantly related,
absolutely.
of.
The Bryan Singer thing, I absolutely love The Usual Suspects. So it's got Bryan Singer and Kevin Spacey in it. So I'm like very troubled that I can't watch that anymore.
Yeah, I'm very glad that I've got X2. I don't need to buy it again. I'm not going to give any more money to Bryan Singer in the future. So I'm sort of, that's how I morally square it. Yeah, I think it's got a fantastic cast. I think it does a really clever adaptation of the source material that sticks like really close when it needs to and comes up with like clever solutions for making it fit in that universe. I think the casting is top notch. Brian Cox is absolutely fantastic as Stryker. I love the way it kind of expands on some of the minor roles, especially like Iceman has that great kind of scene where it's the kind of the coming out metaphor, which is really like cleverly done. And I think it's just terrific. That opening sequence with Nightcrawler, so good. Absolutely breathtaking to see that in the cinema, and just felt like you were watching something really kind of transformative, like that kind of action had not really been captured on film before, that kind of rapid fire teleporting character like that. I can't really think of anything that had done that before or anything that's done it quite as well.
It definitely
since.
sets the tone for the rest of the movie. When a movie opens like that, as good as that, the White House scene when Nightcrawler, which is Alan Cummins, isn't it?
Yeah.
Of all people.
Yeah. Who you would think like what a strange choice, but he works really well.
He's really good. Yeah. I think that's one of my top 10 beginnings ever. I got to see this a little bit earlier than everyone. I worked at a bowling alley at the time. They had a cinema above us, and we always got invited to when they test the reels. I guess they do. So for like a week before, they always like, come up and see, just make sure it plays okay. I remember sitting half an hour once trying to see the end of Jackass, but this one played fine. I just described it to my friends the next day. They were so jealous. And I was like, this beginning was going to blow your mind, lads. It's amazing. And the effects are so good.
Yeah.
They're still good now.
Yeah.
Like the effects
it
are still
holds
really
up
good
so
now.
well.
Yeah, and such a clever use of like practical, like the makeup is really good. Like he's not quite kind of like comics accurate Nightcrawler, but I think as a adaptation into the universe that they'd already created, it works really well. He's a little bit kind of more tortured soul than the kind of the bouncing figure of fun that he can be in the comics. But yeah, I think it's great, and like you say, it sets the tone so well of kind of managing to make the kind of the fantastic and the very real mesh together. You've got that great like closing shot of the knife buried in the Resolute desk in the Oval Office with the Mutant Freedom Now tag on it. And just such great filmmaking and editing and everything like that.
So when you saw it, like you said, you're a big X-Men fan. What were your expectations going in?
I mean, I'd followed the kind of reading all the stuff like Empire and things like that in the build up to it. And so I had quite high expectations. Like I said, I really enjoyed the first one. I was vaguely aware of like some of the casting. Obviously, the kind of the internet rumor mill as it exists now wasn't quite at the same speed, and certainly I didn't have access. I wasn't on the Ain't It Cool News or whatever existed then. But I was aware of some of the stuff that like the casting and things like that, and some of the characters that they were introducing, and I knew that they'd made Wolverine the kind of the main character of the first one, which makes sense. So knew that they'd probably be exploring his past and things like that. But yeah, I don't think I was prepared for kind of quite how ambitious it was in terms of just the kind of the scope, and like I say, like managing to have good stories for everyone. I think there's some people who could come out better and who are a little bit underserved. Cyclops and Storm, I think they've never quite got right on screen yet. hopefully when they come into the MCU, they'll actually put the character work in and make them kind of pop as hard as some of the easier characters to adapt have kind of become popular. But yeah, I think it's, you know, there's so many sequences in that film that just blew me away, like the attack on the school.
Brilliant.
That comes kind of halfway through. That's kind of like, I still hold that up as like so good, and you know, having read a lot of the comics, it's still one of my, if I think of kind of X-Men media as a whole, it's one of my favorite like sequences, because it's that great idea of like, oh, these, you know, you've got these hardened mercenary military tough guys, or, you know, kind of thing, coming into this school to attack these teenagers, and yet they're woefully unprepared for what they actually find there. And it's got that great mix of, you have these you know, these teenage characters who are incredibly like vulnerable, and, you know, they are children, but they also have this incredible kind of strength and power and abilities that they can use, and it deploys them in really interesting ways. You get Siren doing the sonic screen that kind of disrupts everyone, and you get Shadowcat, you know, even though she wasn't one line, I think, in that film, you know, you get a sequence of her running through the walls, and you get that brilliant Colossus cameo.
I wish they used him more.
I mean, I think it's a shame. He obviously had a bit more to do in X-Men: The Last Stand, but the quality of that film is so dire that it doesn't really count.
I want to ask about that.
Yeah, and I think the final fight with between Wolverine and Lady Deathstrike again is just kind of really interestingly done, and like Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart's so great in it, continuing their kind of,
I think,
the rivalry
and friendship,
the complex relationship.
I love that.
Yeah,
I love how
exactly.
nuanced it is. I love how Magneto is a baddie. That you're really. I'm really sympathetic to Magneto. I think I really kind of get his.
Oh, yeah.
I get why he's like he is. You know, I feel that I can understand, and I also I think it's so badass that he makes the iron in someone's blood rip out of them.
That scene is so good.
That's
as well.
so good. It is so good.
The escape, all of the action scenes, like there's something in them that just sticks in my memory. That's just like, that's so great. Like the even quite small scale stuff, like when the police get called to Iceman's like parents' house, and you have pyro setting the cars on fire. It's such a great kind of example of that character who is clearly kind of starts out at the Xavier Institute and is headed towards the evil path, but you kind of understand that he is, you know, he sees this response that has come for them of all these armed cops based on nothing beyond them just being mutants, and you know, he kind of snaps and is like, you know, if you're that scared of me, I'm going to show you why you should be scared. And then you get that great scene between Magneto and him when they're on the jet or a helicopter, I can't remember which, where Magneto's like, you are a god among insects, and, you know, you should never apologize for it. And you understand how seductive Magneto's ideas are, and, you know, how in a lot of ways he's kind of in the right. You know, the humans have done these, you know, awful things and continue to do these awful things, and maybe sort of singing Kumbaya and hoping that the humans are nice to us is not,
and you understand
not the best
where that's come
method
from,
of dealing with it.
You know, he was a Jewish boy in a concentration camp, essentially, wasn't he? So his parents ripped away from him. You can absolutely understand why he's like he is. I love Magneto. I think he's just my favourite character.
I also love the fact he's not the bad guy in this film. Like, as good as Magneto, like Ian McKellen is, and he's always sneering, and you think, yeah, he's trouble. Brian Cox and Stryker's there.
Oh god, William Stryker's the most evil man on the planet. Like,
and he just turns out to 11.
Easily. Yeah. Absolutely.
Every good film has a good bad guy, and if you don't have a good bad guy, then what's the point?
He lobotomized his own son.
Yeah.
Like, that's just...
Yeah.
There isn't any more evil than that. That's it.
So, the sequels. So, this ends on a really good cliffhanger, doesn't it? With the Phoenix in the water. And were you excited for that? Do you think, fucking hell, they're going to do the Phoenix, the Dark Phoenix?
Yeah, I mean, I was. I then Last Stand came along. I think it is, the Phoenix story is so hard to tell in film, I think, because it's the kind of thing where ideally you need a film that's about Phoenix kind of showing up in whatever that means, whether it's Jean Grey kind of unlocking a new level of her powers, or you go for the kind of cosmic stuff, which is, you know, from the comic books, but, you know, depends on how you're doing an adaptation of these stories, but like I think you need a film where it's just her at that new power level dealing with whatever problems before you then have the twist of her like her power being corrupted. I think the films have managed to wreck it twice. I'm not sure that like Last Stand is terrible, but it might actually be better than Dark Phoenix because Dark Phoenix is so dull. And Last Stand, even though it's ridiculous, it has some moments where you're just like, yeah, fine, whatever, okay, this is so stupid. Let's have Vinnie Jones as the Juggernaut, whatever. And they keep making the same mistakes. They keep having it become Xavier's story rather than Jean's story. They keep completely screwing up the Jean and Cyclops relationship, which is kind of foundational to it. They keep making it about power corrupting Jean Grey rather than having her have that power and then other people trying to take advantage of her, and that is what kind of triggers that descent into darkness. It shouldn't just be, hey, this woman's so powerful she must go crazy, because that's it's a trope that's shown up over and over again in comic books and other media, and it's pretty damn sexist. Like, so much of what makes the story in the comics great is it's about people trying to take advantage of her and woefully underestimating her like capabilities, and it coming back to bite them on the arse, but in a way that kind of slowly kind of corrupts her and twists the power that she's using into something less kind of pure and something that then kind of controls her. But if she'd have just been left to use it in the kind of heroic way that she wanted to, probably would have been fine.
You almost need a Phoenix trilogy, don't you? You almost need a that would be how to make it in movie terms, is make it a trilogy and have it all about her. And the X-Men, the rest of the X-Men are kind of background characters essentially.
Yeah, I mean, I think
maybe Marvel.
Who knows? Maybe. I mean, I don't know how I feel about integrating the mutants into the MCU. I think it's tricky when you already have a universe up and running of like, how do you, because they're so often used as kind of an analogy and a metaphor for various minorities, like how do you suddenly just drop this minority into a universe? I think there's ways they could do it and clever ways they could do it, but I'm apprehensive about it until it's actually done and I can pick it apart then. And I think there's other stories that they could cover before they try and do Phoenix again if they decide to do it. I understand why they keep coming back to it, because it's one of the best comic stories ever written. It's a tricky one to adapt. You kind of, like you say, you almost need to do a trilogy or have it be like a background subplot kind of running in one or two films and then coming to the fourth in the third film. So much of the X-Men comics is kind of this long running soap opera stuff, and so in theory they're really suited to the kind of the model that the MCU has now, and they'd be perfect for all your Disney Plus series and stuff like that. So who knows, we shall see.
What is the sequel you've been most disappointed with? So you probably went in with a lot of hype and then at the end you just felt really deflated. Not a bad sequel, just disappointed.
Yeah, I mean, the X-Men ones are up there. As soon as they kind of switched to Brett Ratner, my expectations dropped considerably. Yeah. And, knowing that they were kind of trying to do two different plots at the same time from the kind, like, rather than just focusing on one, it felt very I don't know if Spider-Man 3 came out before X-Men 3?
Spider-Man 3.
Probably. I think Spider-Man 3 probably came out after, now I think about it. But they both had similar issues where it's like, hey, let's try and do like 3 different storylines at the same time. It's you don't need to do that. In terms of disappointment, I was actually really disappointed with Guardians of the Galaxy 2.
Oh, okay.
I know some people really love it. I wasn't blown away by Guardians of the Galaxy 1. Like, it's a film, I enjoyed it at the time, and the more I go back to it, the more things I find to kind of pick apart at it. And Guardians 2 kind of, I felt like it focused on all the things that I liked least about the first Guardians film. And I was excited going in. I thought there's bits about Guardians that I love. I think the visual sense of it is gorgeous, far more interesting than most of what the MCU is doing. Generally speaking, I like James Gunn as a director and as a writer, but there were just elements of it that I was just like, I'm not enjoying this. The sense of humor, like everybody's constantly laughing at their own jokes in that film, and I find it really irritating. And I think it's another case of there's a lot of plot points that don't seem to really go anywhere. There's the whole stuff with I can't even remember the name of them, the golden people who are like flying around in the drones at the end.
Yeah.
Which I know is kind of trying to set up future plot points, but it takes up so much real estate in the film that it feels like that could have been used better elsewhere. Yeah, so I kind of came out of that and I was like, oh man, I didn't necessarily have high hopes for that film, but I was hoping that it would kind of take the things that I really enjoyed about Guardians and focus on those, and instead it took the parts that I really disliked and made a film out of those.
It's not the best.
So yeah,
I think it come pretty low in my ranking of the MCU movies. I especially don't like the thing, Star-Lord's dad being a planet or a god. I'm not sure what he is, but all that gets confusing. And
yeah. I mean, I respect James Gunn for having the balls to be like, yeah, we're going to take some of the weirdest stuff from like the Marvel comics. Hey, you heard of this guy? Ego the Living Planet. And, you know, and trying to sell that to, you know, a big general audience. And the fact that a general audience is now willing to accept it, where, you know, you go back 20 years ago and it was like, oh, I don't think we can have them in yellow spandex. They might look weird. It's like, you want weird? The two of the most popular characters are a talking tree and a talking raccoon. So, you know, more power to him for that. But I think the execution of those ideas is kind of lacking. And, you know, you end up with a film where it's got like a David Hasselhoff cameo and a sort of like a Pac-Man joke in the big grand finale, and it just feels like it's constantly undercutting itself, and it doesn't need to keep taking the mickey out of itself. It can be a serious and heartfelt film and still have a sense of humor about itself, but it doesn't need to keep kind of pointing and going like, hey, this is weird, isn't it?
More Rocket for me. I think Rocket Raccoon's the best thing in that movie.
He is the best character,
Yeah, that'll do me.
Nice.
Yeah, I will forever respect like Bradley Cooper for actually giving a performance and creating like a voice for that character, because not to keep going back to X-Men and that kind of stuff, but I find like the fact that we had Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool and then Ryan Reynolds as Detective Pikachu, and they both have exactly the same voice.
Yeah.
Made it so weird because I would just watch like the Detective Pikachu trailers and I'd just be like, but he just sounds like Deadpool.
That's
and
Ryan Reynolds just plays Ryan Reynolds.
I like Pikachu.
Yeah, we've worked that out now.
Yeah, very much so. So I like that Bradley Cooper actually like put in the effort to craft this like interesting character who isn't just, hey, I'm Bradley Cooper, I'm a film star, so I'm just going to show up and kind of be myself.
The easiest gig ever.
I remember seeing something that was like there was about a 3-year stretch. Vin Diesel was in some of the biggest films of like all time in terms of box office, and all he had to do was say 3 words.
Yeah,
you know,
ridiculous.
but God love him, he puts his heart and soul into each of those, you know, syllables. You know, apparently knows like, oh, you know, this time I'm saying I am Groot, but what I'm really meaning is, you know, oh, the bad guys are coming, or you know, whatever.
That's quite cool.
What is the worst sequel you've ever watched?
So I don't know if this is the worst. Obviously, at Sequelisers, we deal with a lot of bad sequels. But I think the one that sticks in my mind the most is Men in Black 2.
Great answer.
Because the first film was so good, and we kind of I've mentioned on Sequelisers a few times about how I feel like Men in Black 2 was like my critical mind coming online, because before that I just kind of watched movies and they just kind of washed over me, and I was just like, I liked it when the explosions happened and the people said the funny things, and I watched Men in Black 2 and I was like, I'm not feeling entertained. In fact, I'm kind of sitting here and just feeling like angry because I feel like I've been conned out of money. And I can't stop thinking about like, oh, that was bad, I would have done that differently, or you know, that, oh, why have they made this choice? And so it was like my critical brain kind of waking up for the first time, and I kind of walked out of that film and was just like, man, that was bad, I did not like that. And in some ways it was great, because it forced me to start questioning my relationship with media and stuff like that. But what a disappointment after such a brilliant first film. And you kind of think like, where did you go wrong? You had the same stars who have the fantastic chemistry between Tommy Lee Jones and Will Smith. You have the same director. Like, you've got, great budget and all that kind of stuff. And then it's just dreck. It's just bad. I know there's some people out there who do like it, and I'm like, I don't understand you.
They're wrong.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say I like it.
Oh, no.
But I don't hate it.
Oh, Rich, it's shit. It is shit. I was a massive Men in Black fan. I bought the single. It was on the front of the first film magazine I ever bought. I was so into it. I loved Will Smith. I loved the aliens. I loved him and Tommy Lee Jones. I loved everything about Men in Black, and I was so excited for Men in Black 2. And then you watch it, and like you said, the choices they make are just absolutely a puddle of piss. And even the CGI was bad back there with the Johnny Knoxville extra heads.
Yeah.
And the storyline, the terrible... Like, we're talking about how good Magneto and Stryker were as bad guys. And then we get Laura Boyle Flynn, whatever it is.
It's supposed to be a B movie, though, isn't it? It's supposed to be like a 50s... It's supposed to be a 50s B movie, and that's why they're cheesy. That's kind of the angle they're going at. Do you not think it's entertaining at all? Do you not get anything from it?
I mean, I haven't watched it in a long, long time.
I did.
But I can think of like one scene that I enjoy, which is where Will Smith is going to the post office
that's the bit I like.
reawaken Tommy Lee Jones's character, and you have the bit starring the tragically just died Biz Markie doing like beatboxing to kind of like identify himself as an alien. And the reason that scene is actually quite good, apart from like having great people in it, is because it's a joke that wasn't in the first one and feels new. Whereas so much of that film is, hey, you liked the pug from the first film, let's bring him back and give him like more lines but less to
worms.
do, basically. Hey, you like the worm guys, let's bring them back. Hey, you like this, hey, you like that. You liked when Tony Shalhoub got his head shot off, let's do that again. It's repeating every joke with diminishing returns. Even the final joke where you have that zoom out from the Earth to show that, we've been dealing with a galaxy that's in a marble, and hey, our galaxy's in a marble too, and it keeps going out. And they do exactly the same joke at the end of the second film, but worse, because
it's
there's
like
no...
when you get a really shit band tries to play the cover hits of your favourite band, and they're all rubbish.
Yeah.
Like every single moment.
Do you not like Rosario Dawson?
I love Rosario Dawson.
I like her.
I don't like Rosario Dawson in this film. I don't like... Honestly, I watched it a few days ago, and it made me angry again. And I'm sorry I come across angry, but it really was dreadful.
It's all right.
I really hate... One thing I really hate about sequels is when they work so hard in the first film to either kill off or do something to a character so they don't come back. And then they instantly... First thing they do in the second sequel is go and get them back. I hate it. At least have a film in the middle of it, or introduce him right at the end, like as a teaser.
Yeah,
rant over. And
they'd even set up at the end of the first film of like, hey, Linda Fiorentino's character is going to be an agent now, and they've they've sort of not rebooted, but they've modernized the Men in Black a bit, and Will Smith's kind of more in charge now. And then they throw that all away, and it goes back. I understand that producers and whatever want to try and recapture the things that made the first film great, but if you just like photocopy the first film, you're not going to end up with the same lightning in a bottle. You're just going to end up with like a shitty black and white version of it, basically. It's they like you say, they a great ending for like Tommy Lee Jones's character in that first film, and then they undo it and throw it away, and it's so terrible.
Maybe I need to watch it again.
I can feel all the anger returning to me.
Maybe it's because I haven't watched it in a long time.
Yeah.
His new song is "Nod Your Head" is not even a patch on Men in Black, and that also makes me angry.
Yeah.
Is there any scenes that you really don't like?
I mean, like I say, I haven't watched it because it has that presence in my mind of just like, it's so bad. I just remember like you say, Lara Flynn Boyle's character is just so dreadful, and is sort of made of like weird rubbery roots that then turn into a lingerie model, and she's just like a complete charisma vacuum every time she's on screen. And I remember the final, unless I'm confusing it with Men in Black 3, the final fight has like Jay fighting hovering dudes.
Yeah. You're right.
in these sort of like big-headed but small aliens in these kind of hover chairs. And I just remember that fight scene being absolutely atrocious. When you compare it to the conclusion of the first film, where you've got the bug and Tommy Lee Jones getting swallowed, and then Will Smith like desperately trying everything he can to like keep it from climbing up to get into the UFO. And this film just has like Will Smith just being kind of like thrown around a sound stage and like crashing onto metal pipes again and again.
That's exactly what happened.
Yeah. And I mean, said like Lara Flynn Boyle's like villain is so bad, and when you compare it to Vincent D'Onofrio's performance in the first film, which like that should have won an Oscar, like him as Edgar, it's an incredible performance, and it should have been, because there was nothing in the script that particularly asked for that. I've like seen some behind the scenes stuff on it, and he's kind of like, he says how like he got the script for it and he was like, oh okay, so I'm an insect walking around in like a human's skin basically. Like, how am I going to do this? And he got stuff like leg braces put on himself so he'd walk funny and kind of things like that. And he showed up to set and it was like, oh yeah, Barry Sonnenfeld comes over and he's like, so how are you thinking of playing this? And he's like, well, here's what I'm going to do. He does this grotesque performance. Barry Sonnenfeld was just like, okay, can you still move fast when you need to? Because there's a few scenes where you have to run. And it's like, yeah, I think so. Okay, that's fine. And he just like came up with it whole cloth, and it's so good. And you like genuinely forget that he's a human actor giving a performance, because he just is so inhuman in his movements and just feels so, you feel like he's this huge creature crammed into this tiny space, making all these kind of spasmy movements. And then compared to the villains in the second one, just abysmal.
I think I need to watch this movie again.
I can't understand the whole Andre model bit. I just don't get that when I was watching it the other day. I don't see the point of it. It's just to show off her body, right?
It's pretty much the same joke as Terminator 3, where they have the Terminator's boobs blow up. It's very teenage boy humour.
That is true. I probably
it's very
enjoy it.
Early 2000s.
It's very early 2000s. Yes, yeah.
I just want to skip back a little bit to when you said it was like the awakening of your critical brain. I had exactly that same thing in Mission Impossible, and I know Mission Impossible isn't a terrible film, but I watched it and I thought, I don't like this. I'm in the cinema and I'm watching a film and I don't like it. It doesn't make sense. And I'm like, what's happened to me?
Yeah. Yeah, I think there is something special about that first time where you're like, when going to the cinema has just been this kind of like, almost like going to a theme park or something. It's like, oh, it's just an experience. And then, I sit there and it tells me a story and it's great. And then the first time that you go in, especially if you're excited for something and you kind of walk away from it and go like, oh, that really was bad. I think there is something special about that kind of light coming on in your brain.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, because I watch Mission Impossible now and I think, it's all right. It's okay. I don't know why I hated it so much, really. Like, I don't know where that came from. I remember exactly that moment. I remember exactly the moment when I watched a black and white film and thought, hey, black and white films are okay. Like my gran loved the cinema and she took me to watch The Third Man. And I thought, this is going to be so boring. Like, I'm not going to enjoy this. And I loved it. I loved every second of it. Yeah, that's when I was like, hey, black and white films are good. Like, I'm going to watch Casablanca now. So, yeah, I definitely appreciate that. And I think I've got to watch Men in Black 2. Maybe I just didn't register how bad it was before because I wasn't expecting it to be anything special.
Have you seen Men in Black International?
Yeah.
This is worse than that. And that is also a pile of dog shit.
I've avoided International because I was not necessarily so excited. I had high hopes for it because it's got such a great cast, and then I saw the reviews of it and I was like, oh man, they've done it again. They've taken these like characters who should have great chemistry and stuff like that, and then just like saddled them with just terrible stuff.
Yeah, they've done a weird thing. What's his name again? Chris Hemsworth. That they found out he can be funny when he's in Ghostbusters and as in the most recent 4 films, and they've just said, just do that. Yeah. And it's so predictable. You can tell who the bad guy is from the first 2 minutes he's on screen. It's embarrassing. I won't spoil that because it's quite a new film, but it's awful.
One other thing that stands out is the absolutely like, I have no idea what they were thinking when they made this decision, but the fact that they have Tommy Lee Jones and Rip Torn doing like super kung fu at various points is just like...
I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah.
That is bad.
It just comes out of nowhere, and it's like, what? Because they obviously it's a science fiction film, and there's a lot of weird stuff going on, but the reality of it is fairly kind of grounded, and there's no indication of like. There's a bit where like Rip Torn is just like floating in the air doing kicks at Lara Flynn Boyle, and it's just like. What the? I know The Matrix came out a little while ago, or maybe it didn't. Maybe that was pre-Matrix. But what is going on, guys? Like, what prompted this decision? When did you think this was like funny or cinematic? Even like, it's just bad.
I just remembered that bit, and I've remembered like thinking about it and going, he's gonna put a hip out.
Yeah.
Like, he shouldn't be moving like that.
Yes, but
he's an old man.
Rich, it's a B movie, remember?
What I meant was, I understand what they were trying to do with the bad guy. Because they tried to make her like a 50s B movie villain, like a 50s B movie alien, like what she would be in that film. I get that. That's all I'm saying. I still think it's a bad guy compared to the first one. Yeah, and it's nothing scary like the Bug. Like the Bug is amazing, but yeah, I'm just saying that I get what they're trying to do.
Yeah. I always thought that they just threw Johnny Knoxville in because Jackass was big at that point, and they needed.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Let's get the Jackass fans, and I'm one of them, and I was disappointed by that as well. Yeah. So. But thank you for bringing that back into my life, Tim.
Sometimes it's good to just get yourself really angry about a film.
I hopefully will never have to watch it again now, though.
Yeah.
That is the dream.
Do you not think it's going to be someone else's worst sequel, though, Dave?
I don't want to watch it. I'll make you watch it this time. Or we'll watch it together and you can just watch me get more and more angry. Oh, that's another bit that makes me angry. Okay, it's the bit when they work really hard to get the weapons. They go to that guy's house, don't they? Pick up all the new toys, the new weapons.
Oh, yeah.
And you think, wicked, this is going to be a really wicked shootout. And then as soon as they get into the MIB centre, they press the buttons, the doors open, and they all get blown or sucked in, and they lose all their weapons. I was like, well, that was just a waste of a scene. Waste of time, everyone.
Dave, I love the fact that we've swapped roles. Like, it's normally me that hates everything. I was supposed to be the grumpy one that doesn't like anything. You're supposed to be sticking up for stuff. What's going on?
No, I can't see up this. Let's move on to our next question, which is another little question before I get really angry. What is a film that had a sequel that you didn't think needed one? So the first one was so good, so magnificent, they released a second, like, oh, why? Why do we do that?
Oh man, I mean, there's so many of them that are just. There's so many films that should stand alone, and then purely for monetary purposes, they come along and decide to start trying to pump out more. I think comedy is kind of the worst offender here usually because it's so hard to kind of make like comedy scripts when they're really good are like gold dust. And it takes time to like craft a joke. And usually with comedy sequels, they try and really like hurry them out as quickly as possible. And they want it to kind of come out 2 years later so that people who enjoyed the first one still kind of remember it, because it doesn't have the same kind of like plot strength that, having a thriller or an action film,
Sometimes comedies have a shelf life as well.
Exactly, yeah.
Like Hangover was funny at that point, but you watch it now, it's not all works.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's kind of like a prime example, really, isn't it? Like, there's nothing in The Hangover that's begging for a sequel, no. and yet they made 2 more, and it just so much of comedy as well, like is characters getting into these kind of like extraordinary situations. The Hangover, it's a great example, and mining that for comedy, and you just have to kind of like hang a hat on the fact that, oh wow, they're back in the same situation. Who would have thought it? It becomes increasingly kind of ridiculous to try and tell, and because if you're making it purely for money, then you've probably got producers who are saying, just make it the same as before. You guys are funny, just be funny again and make it close to the first one. And so it's very rare that you'll get a comedy that will have a sequel, and the sequel will push it off in a different direction. I can't really think of any off the top of my head where they've actually really tried to find a new angle on the same characters kind of thing. Usually it's just, we're going to retread the same jokes over and over again, and we're going to bring back all the characters you liked from the first one, and then we're going to have them do that line that you liked, except this time they're going to shout it.
The only way to do it is like the Kevin Smith movies, I think, isn't it? And do a completely different movie that you just slot the characters into that people like. So you have Jay and Silent Bob in all of those movies, but Dogma is nothing like Clerks. It's like you make a completely different movie and just slot in the people that everyone went, oh, I like them, I like those guys. That kind of, that's the only way I think you can do it with comedy. But I mean, I like Friday, and I actually like Next Friday more than I like Friday. But they don't do anything special with it. It's just, I just think there's more jokes in it. It's funnier.
But I just think of stuff like Anchorman 2, which I loved the first Anchorman film when it came out. I laughed so hard at it. But A, there was no need for a sequel, and B, that is a dreadful film. And it's just you think. It's very rare, especially for comedy, where you're focusing on being funny rather than like crafting these amazing characters usually, that you can have a story that really prompts you to go like, well, hang on, I want to keep going with these characters. I want to find out what happens next to them. Most comedies aren't set up that way because for the most part, they're trying to just deliver the jokes to get the laughs out of the audience, and that's perfectly fine, and obviously you get some that are more subtle than that and are satirical, or they're really character focused comedies that are a bit different. But even stuff like Wes Anderson, like I would never want to see a sequel to a Wes Anderson film. No. Because as much as I love the characters in them, that's the story that he had to tell with them. And they're not necessarily, like, I don't want to check back in on the Royal Tenenbaums 5 years later and see what misadventures they've got up to. Like, that sounds awful.
Would be awful. God.
I'm trying to think of a comedy that has a decent sequel.
As in, I can think of a comedy that has a decent sequel, but as Tim was saying, not that that's anything different. The only one I can think in my head, and you guys would probably disagree, is Austin Powers 2, which I think...
Austin Powers is the only one I can think of. Yeah, that was the only one I was like, do you know what? They're okay.
Yeah.
Like, actually,
I think we talked about this in a previous podcast, and one of my friends texted me and was like, well, Austin Powers 2 is better than Austin Powers 1. He'll be angry if I don't mention him. Ian, here you go.
we just did Fixed Gold Member on Sequelisers, actually, and had a big discussion about it. And it's interesting how, like, for a lot of people, those first two films really melt together, and people don't remember, like, oh, Mini-Me doesn't show up until the second film and stuff like that. And I think for a lot of people, they've kind of turned into the same film almost. But I think it, like you say, they have the good idea of, like, the first film is about a guy from the 60s brought to the 90s, and then the second film is what happens if we send him back in time now, and him having learned the lessons of the first film to be a more kind of quote unquote modern person, and see how he deals with that. And then the third film is just a complete absence of ideas, and they're like, what if the 70s? but also we don't really do much with that, so it's like our version of the 70s is basically just the 60s but with disco music. And also we're only going to spend maybe like 30% of the film there.
Yes, it is rubbish. What is your dream sequel?
So I absolutely love Leon the Professional.
Great film.
Great choice.
Just such a great film, such amazing performances from Jean Reno and Natalie Portman. And it kind of boggles my mind that given that Natalie Portman went on to be like a superstar and one of the best actresses of her generation, all those kind of things, that we never got a film that said, hey, what's Matilda up to now?
Yeah.
Like, what is this little girl who wasn't, it's not like raised to be an assassin or anything, but had this incredibly like dramatic and meaningful experience, this kind of, like the film's meant to span like maybe a month of time that she spends with Leon, maybe like 2 weeks to a month, I guess. What is her life like now? And to me, that is, we talked about like stories that don't need to be told. To me, there is another story there, and I'm sort of, like I say, it boggles my mind that no one ever came along and went like, hey, we've got this incredibly famous actress, and there's a kind of like hanging question mark at the end of that film of, as much as it's about Leon trying to kind of like save her and get her out of this situation that she's found herself in, and try and find a way to keep her safe and a way to kind of get her out of the situation and out of the life that he has made for himself. I think because that film is very tragic on a lot of levels, I feel like there's room there to do another film which is about kind of the grown Matilda's tragedy of like what happens if she gets sucked back into that life or something like it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I completely agree. And that when I knew this was a dream sequel, and I watched Leon again, and I was like, yes, I'm so glad I get to watch this again. And
Yeah, it's
and
so
also I
nice
was
when we get to
thinking,
watch good films again.
How do
Yeah.
we make a sequel out of this? Where does the sequel come from? And that's exactly what I thought too. Is that there really is scope to follow Matilda's story, isn't there? There really is an opportunity there, and I don't know if Luc Besson is like I don't think he's even like thought about it now, is he? He's too into Taken, and
I think Luc
that
Besson
kind
is
of-
in the same boat as Bryan Singer or somewhere at the moment. He's not in.
Yeah, he's
I did
again,
not know that.
unfortunately.
I was about to say, will you keep the same director? But I don't think they'll have him back.
No,
So would you
I would not.
Would you like to direct it yourself, or would you? Is there a director?
No, I actually I have a director in mind. I even have like a date when I would have released it. We're past it
Go
now.
for it.
But because to me, Leon, even though I think it's, again, this is kind of about the age when you watch it and stuff like that. It's not one of these films where it's like, oh, New York is its own character in this film. But for me, it for some reason it's lodged in my brain as like a kind of an iconic New York film.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking about this, and I was like, well, I don't want to get Luc Besson back, because of the various, allegations and stuff surrounding him, but also because he's just kind of gone downhill since then. Like, who would I want? And I would want a director who could kind of capture that. And my brain went to Spike Lee.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't think he's ever, if memory serves, like done a full-blown kind of like action thriller. I think the closest is probably Inside Man, which is more of like a heist film.
Did he do the Old Boy remake? Am I?
Oh, of course, yes.
I've
yeah.
never seen it, so I can't tell you.
I've never seen his version of Old Boy, but I do think that there's so many scenes in his films. He does tension absolutely fantastically, and like character-driven stuff so well. And I think that having him direct that would be really, really interesting.
So I instantly thought kind of Emerald Fennell from after Promising Young Woman. If you're going to do a female-led assassin movie, then I'd really like to see what she would do with that. I think that'd be awesome.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of female directors out there actually now that are coming up that would be really, really interesting to see do this. I think, and it would be interesting to get that point of view on it. I think the thing with picking Spike Lee is like there's he's going to bring in some different conversations. There's going to be some conversations about like race and stuff in there, and I think that there would be an interesting angle that you could find on that, because I think so much of Leon is about kind of like innocence.
Yeah.
And both Leon, even though he's a hitman, is quite this innocent figure. And obviously Matilda, he's like trying to, even though she's quite world weary in a lot of ways and kind of cynical, he's trying to maintain some of her innocence, even while he's teaching her how to like snipe politicians in the park, and stuff like that. And I think there's an interesting conversation you could have about kind of like who gets to be innocent in our society. And Spike Lee could have, there's a racial element to that could be really interesting there. But obviously, I think there's a lot of female filmmakers who you could pick out and who could also like produce some really interesting stuff. I had an idea actually for when I'd kind of like put it 2011 and get Natalie Portman. She'd just have won her Oscar for Black Swan, so she's in that kind of post-Oscar buzzy period, and you could swoop in and get her to make this instead of Your Highness, which is the dreadful stoner fantasy action comedy that she was in. It's appalling. James Franco, Danny McBride.
Oh, that sounds bad already.
Yeah, it's not good.
You had me at James Franco.
Yeah. Yeah, so I would swoop in. I would say, don't do that, do this. I would also, in 2010, there was the film Never Let Me Go, Keira Knightley in it, and she had a younger version of herself played by an actress called Ella Purnell, who's gone on to do some other things. She was most recently in Army of the Dead by Zack Snyder, but we'll forgive her for that. But she is like the spitting image of a young Keira Knightley, And obviously Keira Knightley played Natalie Portman's like double in Phantom Menace. And I was like, aha, brilliant. If I need to do like flashbacks to young Matilda again, I've got perfect casting lined up there already. That was my brain process ticking away at like how I would do a Matilda in that period anyway.
How would you top Gary Oldman?
I was just going to say that, Dave. That's exactly what I was going to say, because Gary Oldman is amazing in this movie.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would almost be the challenge, because I think you could get a really great performance out of Natalie Portman as especially with a decent script and a good director and stuff like that. But I think you would need a really compelling villain. I think you'd have to have someone who would do something dramatically different to Gary Oldman, because if they were trying to just play on that same level as him, you're not going to beat him. You're not going to beat him listening to Beethoven in the apartment before the like kind of bloodshed all kicks off. And like his performance, I think, sort of almost like lodged itself in my brain more than all the other. When I first saw Leon, like that was the thing I remembered, and then I went back and watched it again and was like, oh, there's so much great stuff in here, but just Gary Oldman just being this ball of intensity is so great. So yeah, I'm not sure who you would get to be a villain. I'm not sure even kind of what plot I would necessarily want it to deal with. I think kind of, like I say, I think there's themes that you could explore about kind of trauma and kind of the effect that period of her life had on her, and how she tried to kind of like adjust to it and stuff like that. And possibly even having her try and like almost kind of become a like protector to other like young girls and stuff like that. I think that would be a kind of natural step for that character to be kind of sort of that approach of like, I had something horrible happen to me when I was a kid. I'm going to make sure no one else has to go through that. Almost the Batman mindset. But yeah, as far as the villain goes, I'm not sure. But it would need to be someone bloody good.
I think you're onto
What would
something.
you call it? Matilda the Professional.
Because I've always wondered what kind of life she has. Like, did she stay at that boarding school?
Yeah.
Or did she leave and life of crime or whatever? Or did she have a good upbringing? It makes me wonder quite often, especially watching it the other night after she planted her tree.
Yeah, that is such a great ending, because I think there is that sense of like ambiguity hanging over her of just like, has she managed to escape this life? Has kind of Leon's sacrifice managed to get her out of it? But there's a kind of, like I say, there's a sense of like tragedy hanging over the whole film. And so I think it would be I don't think it would be undercutting the ending of it to have it like turn out that at some point she got dragged back into it. Because I think there's almost a sense of kind of the inevitability of violence and stuff in those films.
Well, the shootout's one of the best in the apartments is right up there for me.
Oh.
It's just so clever as well.
Yeah, and just I mean, it's a film full of just amazing like iconic moments, like when Leon just kind of appears out of the shadows and puts the knife to the guy's throat in the kind of the opening sequence, and then brings the phone up. It's just like poetic cinema.
We were talking about earlier about awakenings when you're watching cinema. I'm pretty sure Leon's one of the ones for me that just started to get my creative juices flowing and thinking about films in a different way. It's just so, and the music, is it Eric Serra or his name?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
the music's so good in here as well. I remember listening to that a lot at university, and it's just it would have to start off with a big action piece, wouldn't it? Or would you?
I think so. I think you would not. I think you would have some big action beat, but not necessarily something that involved Matilda to start with.
Okay.
And then bring her character kind of into the fold, because I don't, as much as I'm like, oh, I think there's an ambiguity over, did she escape from this life of crime? Like what, has she turned into almost like Leon Mark II kind of thing? I don't think I picture her, she's not one of the Fast and the Furious cast members. Like, if you're going to have like this big explosive opening, you would want, I think that would be a good example of, that's how you bring the villain in, and then you show her reacting to it, especially because like so much of Leon is about like, stealth and subtlety. And talking about, the when you get really good, all you need is the knife, and that's the closest you get, as close up as possible, and they barely know you're there. Whereas, Gary Oldman character is like, fuck it, everyone's going to know I'm here, bring me everyone, blow up this, whole place. So I think you almost need the antagonist as the kind of the force of chaos, the match that lights the dynamite kind of thing at the start of the film.
Oh, it'd be amazing. I would love to see it. I really would. I'm surprised they haven't done it. They must have at some point had a conversation with Natalie Portman about it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what like the rights situations and stuff like that is. I mean, it's entirely possible that she sort of says no. In her mind, Matilda has a happy ending, and to go back to that would be she wouldn't want to see that. Who knows? But
Devil's advocate, do you think some of the I'm trying to think of a way of putting it. Well, the storyline, the relationship between Leon and Matilda, does that put some people off? We can't talk about Leon without talking about the whole that relationship.
I think it does put people off. I know that there's like cuts that were made especially when it was shown in America that like don't exist, and there's kind of like the almost like the unrated French version, which sounds a lot worse than it is.
I think that's the director's cut that's on 4K that I watched the other day that I've got now. And it's no worse than the original, to be honest, when it comes to that kind of thing. It's still got those question marks. Yeah,
and I think obviously, especially like knowing the stuff about Luc Besson we do now, like there's big question marks over that. But I think that the stuff that it's exploring in the relationship between Leon and Matilda is like, obviously it's stuff you want to handle correctly, but I don't think it's conversations that should be necessarily like forbidden, because he is very much like kind of loves her like a father, at least is my reading on it.
Yeah.
He's very much like this guardian, like parental figure, and she's like a teenage girl, and she's kind of exploring, she's trying to work out how she feels about this person who is not her family, who's not her father, who has come in and rescued her, and her kind of working through that is part of the film. Like there's, she kind of gets a crush on him and, all those kind of things. But I think towards the end of the film, it's much more that their relationship is very much like parent and child. And, it's him sacrificing himself for her. And, the relationship has become much simpler by the end. But I don't think it's necessarily wrong to have that complexity in there, because as long as you're handling it sensitively and not making it something exploitative, and also it's not like Leon is ever kind of predatory towards her, and then we still hold him up as a hero kind of thing. It's very much it's about her feelings towards him. And so I think as long as you have a decent writer and director and stuff like that who is aware of that they're dealing with quite complex emotions and stuff like that, I think that's fine.
Yeah.
I think that's the other thing, is that you can have a sequel would give you the chance to have that conversation, to have Matilda's character talking about how she feels about those moments looking back now as a grown-up.
Yeah.
Does she, how does she feel about them? Maybe it's that kind of thing of like, I can't believe I, like did that. Like it was so kind of like weird and embarrassing, or, what, I think there's plenty of material to explore there.
I think, like you said, New York is a big part of this film, but I also feel like I don't think I've seen a film that's not set in France feel quite so French. Like,
yeah. It's a very European sensibility.
A lot of it was filmed in France, wasn't it?
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I think and I think it's weird. I think if I kind of rewatched it now with a real like eye and focusing on locations, I'd probably go like, why do I feel this is so like New York when it's obviously Paris or Marseille, like doubling for kind of ambiguous New York-ish American city.
It would be Glasgow now if it happened nowadays.
Yes, yeah.
Belfast,
yeah, or whatever new place has the biggest tax breaks. Yeah, for whatever reason, I think it just in my brain it was like, oh, this is a real New York film. So who knows? Maybe a sequel they'd explore a bit more the kind of the city and stuff like that. But like you say, it's a very French/European feeling American film.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's the thing of like, it creates this unique sense. It doesn't feel like many other films out there.
It still feels relevant today, and it still holds up. I think if they brought back a sequel, I don't think there'd be any problems. Like sometimes a time gap is a problem when it comes to these like 20 years, 25 years, 30 years later films. But I think with this, there's a purpose for why there could be such a gap. I think it'd be great. Yeah. I'd watch it.
You always hope that if you come up with an idea like this, you're like, yeah, it could be good. I think there's potential for it to be good. You just have to hope that if it did come true, it wouldn't be hugely disappointing.
And those were Tim from the Sequelisers, Unequal Sequels. Dave.
Yeah.
There were some good movies. There's some good movies, and also things that I just didn't disagree with.
I feel like I went a bit ranty on Men in Black 2.
I mean, I definitely don't dislike Men in Black 2 as much as either of you two. But, you know.
I truly hate it. I truly hate it. I really, really hate it.
I kind of think it's okay. Like, I mean, it's not brilliant. It's not amazing. It's okay.
Just the thought of it makes me angry, so we should move on. Yeah, I
Let's
thought
move on,
Tim's picks were great. I think his knowledge about comic books and comic book stuff like that, it was great. It's great to talk about X-Men 2. I love X-Men 2 and I love Leon.
I was really happy to get to watch Leon again. That was a great shout. It was really nice to talk to him. And I'm going to get to go on their Sequelisers podcast at some point too. I'm sure you're going to get to go on it at some point as well. I think
not jealous remotely.
I think I get to go on first because, you know, I'm the more important one.
It's not true. It's because I'm going to go see Frozen the musical.
You know, I'm going to take that actually as that. We all know that Dave is the lead presenter of this podcast, and if you don't already, you probably don't realise that Dave puts in all the work to make this podcast happen as well. I watch a few movies, turn up and talk nonsense about them, but Dave does all the editing, he does all the social media, and he does all the booking of the guests and stuff as well, and trying to getting people on this podcast. And so when I say that I'm the more important one, I really am joking.
Thanks, man.
To be honest, mate, I'm a little lost about what I'm going to say when I go on this podcast, on the Sequelisers podcast, because normally I just take your lead.
Well, normally I follow your lead, so
I was blind leading the blind. We
You'll
just
be
go
fine.
Around in circles.
Yeah, check out the Sequelisers podcast. It's a great podcast. I've just listened to the 4-hour epic season 8
Really?
finale.
I haven't got to that one yet.
Oh, it's some fantastic rants in it. And it's really good, really interesting, really.
What did they fix?
Rise of Skywalker.
Oh, it's Rise of Skywalker, of course. I knew that.
So it's
it
a great
needs a lot of fixing.
It's a great companion piece with our last episode, Matt's episode. He goes into more detail, basically. If you enjoyed Matt's episode, go listen to that. And Tim's, if you enjoyed this episode, go listen to that again. Should we tell them where we can listen to our own podcast?
Yeah. I mean, you should know because you're listening to it. But you can
Yeah.
basically listen to it on any podcasting platform. We're on all of them. So we're on your Apple, we're on your Google, we're on your Spotify, we're on all of them. There's not a podcasting platform we're not on, I don't think.
You can contact us on Twitter and Instagram and email unequalsequel and unequalsequel@hotmail.com. So if you've got anything to say, tell us, get in touch.
Absolutely. And if you are in some way connected to the movie industry, if you are an editor, if you are a runner, if you are in costume, if you work in anything in the movie industry, we would love to talk to you about sequels because we just love hearing different people's opinions. We don't care if you're famous. We don't care if you have a huge job in the movies or a tiny job in the movies. We just want to talk to people that are passionate about films.
Yes, we're about to sit down and work out season 2. So
we are, yeah. So get your shots in now. We will get to you on season 2.
Have we got anything else to say? I don't think so.
No, don't think so. I'm getting a dog tomorrow. That's all I've got
exciting.
to say. Yeah, I'm very excited.
Cool. That's a goodbye from me.
As goodbye from me. Bye.
See you next week. Bye.